Malcolm Wiltermood had no memory of how he arrived in the desolate town, nor did he question it. Rather, it was as one finds themselves in the middle of a dream, never once stopping to ask, how did I get to this place? The last thing he did remember was walking up the road and past the city limit sign. According to it, the town was called Rose Gate. Although the name had an air of familiarity to it, Malcolm was certain he had never before been to the town. Every house and every structure was made of stone. Strange, too, was that even though the sun was heavy in the west and softly caressed the horizon, no lights illuminated the barren streets. Malcolm didn't see vehicles or machinery of any kind. It was as if he had stepped out of time and into some faraway land. Then there was the overwhelming feeling of being utterly alone. He had felt alone before, sure, but this was somehow different. It was like cold, damp air that clung to his body and saturated him to the very marrow of his bones. No bird sang, nor did a single insect chirp. The only sound Malcolm could hear was that of his own footsteps crunching through the streets of loose gravel. It was a foreboding and alien place, and Malcolm wanted desperately to be home, where he belonged. As the pinks and lavenders of the setting sun darkened into grays and purples, Malcolm found his footsteps quickened. When the town became enveloped by the deep shadows of a moonless night, and fog slithered in like some great serpentine apparition, the agonizing loneliness that burdened his entire being metamorphosed into a grotesque, primal fear. The hair of his neck and forearms stood at strict attention. His mouth was filled with glue, and his eyes darted in all directions wildly. When it grew darker still, the maddening silence was shattered by thousands of whispering voices that surrounded him. Malcolm broke into a full run. The fog looked as though it was illuminated from within by some ethereal light. When the roaring whispers calmed back into freakish silence, Malcolm watched, dumbfounded, as dark shadows began to take shape within the fog. He stopped dead in his frantic run and looked in every direction. He could see the silhouettes of men, women, and children were now everywhere. They stood unmoving in front of the stone houses. He was surrounded. But by whom? Malcolm had no reason to believe that the figures hiding just behind the thin wall of mist were in any way hostile. But it all felt so unnatural, so oppressive. His mind raced with 100 questions all at once, and his eyes continued to dart from this place to that. All the while, he was oblivious to the fact that he was walking backwards out of the street and into one of the strange yards that were occupied by the unknown figures, which inexplicably filled him with dread. He reeled and shrieked when he felt fingertips touch his shoulder. Tears welled heavy in his eyes, but refused to drop down his cheeks without the assistance of a blink. But in that moment, blinking was something that Malcolm could not bring himself to do. He was confident that some fetid horror with green dripping flesh, bulging eyes, and a mouthful of rotten teeth would be there to meet him. Expecting the worst, he almost could not believe his eyes when he saw that it was only a woman, quite ordinary in appearance. Malcolm couldn't see her very well in the dark and the fog, but he could tell that she wore a long dress and clutched in one hand a small bouquet of flowers. He fought with the paste in his mouth and his parched, swollen tongue to find his voice. Please, I'm lost. I need to get home, Malcolm said. I don't know where I'm at. I just want to go home. I live in a town called West Knob. Do you know it? Where's the nearest neighboring town from here? Please, I just want to go home. Although he was frantic, the woman seemed unfazed by Malcolm's disposition. She held her flowers to her nose and inhaled deeply of them, then said in a sleepy, trance-like voice, "My daughter came for a visit this morning. She's so thoughtful. She even brought me these flowers. She really is so thoughtful." Again, she brought the flowers to her face and breathed in their aroma. After this, she simply turned, opened the door to her home, and walked inside. As she closed the door, she looked at Malcolm and said in her monotone fashion, "Welcome to Rosegate." The sound of the door as it closed reminded Malcolm of the loud clanging noise made by a cell door in any movie he had ever watched that featured a jail or prison door being slammed shut. Forsaken and forlorn, Malcolm fell to his knees and beat the ground with his fists. "I just want to go home," Malcolm whimpered. There, on the cold ground, smothered by cruel darkness, and the writhing fog. Malcolm hung his head and wept. A voice whispered out from behind him, a voice like that of millions of voices speaking in unison, yet never quite in sync with one another. But it was not the phonic likeness of this voice alone, but what it said that turned Malcolm's insides into slimy ice. "Malcolm Wiltermood," it said. "Come with me, Malcolm. I'll show you home." Malcolm sprung to his feet and whirled around. "Who's there?" Malcolm's voice cracked. He saw only darkness before him. A moment passed, and Malcolm received no rejoinder. "Who?" Malcolm started to repeat himself, but was then interrupted. "Let me show you home, Malcolm. Come with me," the voice of one said. And Malcolm saw a hand extend before him, but still could not see to whom or what it belonged. It was white as ash, and invited Malcolm to take it into his own. "Let me show you, Malcolm. All of your questions will be answered." Malcolm trembled in full paroxysm and looked at the hand that held itself out to him. He hesitated at first, but then surrendered himself, finally taking it into his own. With all of the abruptness of lightning, the overpowering fear that gained dominion over Malcolm Wiltermood was vanquished. He was completely at ease as the figure walked him through the streets of Rosegate. The two spoke not a word as they wandered the darkness, past homes of granite and more palatial structures made of marble. But as they walked, Malcolm began to remember where he was before coming to the strange community. He was driving. That's right, he was driving home from work. The same route every day, over the hill, down the highway, past the figure that led Malcolm stopped in front of one of the strange stone houses, which, under the veil of night, looked no different from any of the others. "Here you are, Malcolm. Home at last." Home? Malcolm's memories continued to flood back. It was raining before. No, not just raining. It was storming. Lightning flashed and rain poured down in buckets. The phone rang. Malcolm's wife. As Malcolm's memories continued to return, he looked up at the strange figure that led him through the streets of Rosegate, and he asked in a calm voice, "Who are you?" But the strange guide did not answer, nor did it have to. Malcolm knew too well now. It pulled its hand away, and Malcolm sensed more than saw that it was gone. He looked at the building the figure called his home. Above the door, carved in the stone, Malcolm read his name there. He opened the door and started inside. Malcolm vividly recalled the shadow match he had with his wife over the phone. Late, always late coming home from work. "You're being ridiculous," he remembered yelling into his phone. "I don't care more about work than you." "No, I don't." "Oh, please don't give me that." "Well, I'm almost home now, so what the hell are you going on about?" Almost home. He was just passing the cemetery, and it would have been only 5 minutes more. He recalled the helpless feeling that gripped him as he lost control of the hydroplaning car. He remembered seeing the semi and knowing what was inevitable. He remembered the last thing he saw before the 18-wheeler slammed into him at full speed. The stone wall and its accompanying sign, Rose Gate Cemetery.